Welcome to Whispering Willow's Sleep, soft-spoken tales to slow the day's thoughts and carry you toward peaceful sleep. Before we begin, tell me where in the world you're listening from tonight, and, if you wish, what's on your mind. I read every note and love keeping quiet company across distances. If this brings you peace, a like and subscribe will help me make more nightbound stories. And if you'd like to support even further, you can buy me a coffee through the link in the description. Now, settle in, get comfortable, and breathe with me as we begin. The rain fell in gentle whispers against the windows of 221B Baker Street, each droplet painting watery paths down the glass like tears from the London sky. Inside, the hearth crackled with amber warmth, casting long shadows that danced across the Victorian wallpaper. The scent of pipe tobacco hung in the air, mingling with the earthy fragrance of wet wool and old books. Sherlock Holmes sat quietly in his armchair, his keen eyes half closed in thought, while his fingers traced absent patterns on the armrest. Across from him, Dr. John Watson leafed through the evening paper, the gentle rustle of the pages providing a soothing counterpoint to the patter of rain. "Curious," murmured Holmes, breaking the comfortable silence. "Have you noticed, Watson, that the rain tonight falls with an almost musical quality, like a whispered conversation just beyond our understanding?" Watson lowered his paper and tilted his head, listening. "I hadn't noticed, but yes, there is something almost melodic about it tonight." Holmes was about to respond when a peculiar sound caught his attention. The door-knocker below, being employed with unusual urgency despite the late hour. 3 sharp raps, followed by 2 softer ones, as if the visitor had momentarily lost their nerve before continuing. A client at this hour? Watson folded his newspaper and placed it aside, glancing at the ornate clock on the mantelpiece. Its hands showed 11:15. "Yes, and one in considerable distress," Holmes replied, rising from his chair with fluid grace. His dressing gown billowed around him like a shadow given form. "Someone who has debated whether to come at all, but whose need has finally overcome social propriety." As if confirming Holmes's deduction, Mrs. Hudson's footsteps could be heard ascending the stairs, followed by lighter, quicker steps, a woman's, moving with the haste of anxiety. "A Lady Eleanor Blackwood, Mr. Holmes," announced Mrs. Hudson as she opened the door, her voice carrying the slight disapproval of one whose evening routine had been disrupted. The woman who entered seemed to bring the night's chill with her. Tall and slender, Lady Eleanor Blackwood wore a travelling cloak of deep blue that shed raindrops onto the carpet like fallen stars. Her face, framed by dark hair, swept elegantly beneath a modest hat, bore the unmistakable signs of sleepless nights and constant worry. In her gloved hands, she clutched a leather-bound journal so tightly that her knuckles strained against the fabric. "Mr. Holmes, Dr. Watson, I apologize for the hour," she began, her voice cultured, but trembling slightly. "But I fear my brother's life hangs in the balance, and conventional methods have failed entirely." Holmes gestured toward the chair he had vacated. "Please, Lady Blackwood, be seated. A warm fire and a willing ear are always available to those in genuine need, regardless of the hour." As she sank into the chair, Watson noticed how the firelight caught something unusual about her eyes, a peculiar wariness that went beyond ordinary fear. She watched the shadows as if expecting them to move of their own accord. "Tea, Mrs. Hudson, if you would be so kind," Holmes requested, before turning his full attention to their visitor. He drew his own chair closer, his piercing gaze taking in every detail of Lady Eleanor's appearance and manner. "Now, pray tell us about your brother and the circumstances that bring you here on such a night." Lady Eleanor's fingers loosened slightly on the journal she held. "My brother, Lord Frederick Blackwood, disappeared 3 nights ago while conducting research at Thornfield Abbey. He was, a scholar of ancient languages and symbols, particularly those associated with early religious practices in Britain." "Thornfield Abbey," mused Holmes, "in Hampshire, if I recall correctly. A Norman structure built upon the ruins of an even earlier Saxon foundation." A flicker of surprise crossed Lady Eleanor's face. "Yes, exactly. The abbey itself is largely abandoned now, save for a caretaker, but the grounds contain several archaeological points of interest. My brother was particularly fascinated by an ancient tomb discovered on the eastern edge of the property." Mrs. Hudson returned with tea, the porcelain cups clinking softly against their saucers like distant bells. The aromatic steam rose in languid curls, momentarily softening the tension in the room. "This tomb," Holmes prompted, after Lady Eleanor had taken a sip of tea, her hands steadying somewhat around the warm cup. "What was its particular appeal to your brother?" "The markings upon it," she replied, opening the journal she had brought and carefully turning it toward Holmes. "Frederick believed they represented a language predating known written systems in Britain. He spent weeks making these copies and attempting translations." Holmes leaned forward, his eyes narrowing as they scanned the pages. Watson, moving to peer over his friend's shoulder, saw intricate drawings of strange symbols, spiraling patterns, angular marks resembling no alphabet he recognized, and recurring motifs of what appeared to be celestial bodies. "Most curious," Holmes murmured, his long fingers hovering over but not touching the delicate sketches. "And these notes in the margins, your brother's observations?" Lady Eleanor nodded. "Yes. As you can see, he believed he was making progress in deciphering them. His last entry speaks of a breakthrough, a connection to ancient Egyptian funerary texts that no one had previously considered." Watson studied the final entry, dated 3 days prior. The handwriting began as the same meticulous script as the earlier pages, but grew increasingly hurried toward the end, as if the writer could scarcely contain his excitement. Or perhaps something else. "The symbols speak of guardians and gateways," Holmes read aloud, his voice dropping to a mesmerizing cadence that seemed to make the very shadows in the room deepen. Not merely warnings to grave robbers, as commonly assumed, but instructions for passage between worlds. The lunar cycle imagery is key. The positioning suggests a ritual timed to specific phases of the moon. Tonight I shall verify my theory. By... Holmes looked up. "And here it ends." "Yes," Lady Eleanor whispered. "He never returned to his lodgings in the village that night. The local constabulary have searched, but they find nothing except..." She hesitated, colour draining from her already pale face. "Except?" Holmes prompted gently. "Except strange markings in the earth around the tomb, as if some ritual had indeed been performed there, and a single glove belonging to Frederick with a substance the constable could not identify staining its fingers." Her composure wavered. "They speak of older disappearances, Mr. Holmes, whispers of others who have vanished near that tomb over decades, even centuries. The villagers call it cursed." The rain continued its soft percussion against the windows, a natural counterpoint to the tale unfolding in the warm room. Watson noticed that Lady Eleanor's tea remained largely untouched, cooling as her story grew colder. "May I?" Holmes asked, gesturing toward the journal. When Lady Eleanor nodded, he lifted it carefully, bringing it closer to the lamplight. His eyes narrowed as he tilted the pages, examining them from different angles. Most interesting. There is a fine residue on these pages, particularly those containing the most recent sketches. Watson peered at the pages, but could detect nothing unusual. What sort of residue, Holmes? A very fine, reddish dust, unlike common soil. Holmes carefully ran his fingertip along the edge of one page, then examined it under his pocket magnifying glass. Consistent with certain types of stone found primarily in underground chambers that have remained sealed for centuries. When disturbed, this dust becomes airborne and settles on everything in the vicinity. Lady Eleanor leaned forward. "You believe my brother actually entered the tomb itself? The local authorities insisted it was sealed and inaccessible." "Not only entered it," Holmes replied, "but spent considerable time within. The dust concentration increases on the later pages, suggesting multiple visits of increasing duration." He closed the journal gently. "There is something else that intrigues me. This symbol, recurring throughout your brother's notes. It appears to be his own mark, not part of the ancient text." He pointed to a small drawing that appeared in the corners of several pages. A crescent moon, with what appeared to be 3 stars arranged in a triangle above it. "Yes," Lady Eleanor confirmed. "Frederick began drawing after his first week at Thornfield. He said it represented his research focus, the lunar connections in the tomb's markings. But in his last letter to me, he mentioned seeing the same symbol elsewhere in the village, marked on certain doors." Her voice lowered. "He thought it might be the sign of some local society or cult with interest in the tomb." Holmes's eyes gleamed with the intellectual excitement that Watson knew so well. A society with knowledge of these ancient symbols, operating in secret within the village. Now that adds a dimension of considerable interest to your brother's disappearance. Watson noticed Lady Eleanor shiver slightly, despite the warmth of the fire. "You believe such a group might be responsible for what happened to Frederick?" "It presents one possibility among several," Holmes replied carefully. "Tell me, Lady Eleanor, did your brother mention any particular individuals in the village who shared his interest in the tomb? Anyone who offered assistance, or perhaps showed unusual curiosity about his work?" She considered it for a moment. "The local magistrate, Sir William Hargrove, provided him access to the Abbey grounds and seemed supportive. The village doctor, Collins, I believe, apparently possesses an extensive library on local history that Frederick consulted. And there was an elderly woman in the village whom Frederick mentioned, Mrs. Penrose, who claimed her family had served as caretakers of the Abbey grounds for generations." Holmes nodded, his fingers forming a steeple beneath his chin, a posture Watson recognized as one his friend adopted when organizing facts in his remarkable mind. Outside, the rain had softened to a gentle mist that blurred the gaslight on the street into halos of amber light. Big Ben tolled midnight in the distance, its sonorous chimes muffled by fog and distance into something almost dreamlike. "Lady Eleanor," Holmes said at last, "I shall take your case. Watson and I will depart for Hampshire on the first available train tomorrow. There are several aspects of this matter that warrant immediate investigation." Relief visibly washed over their visitor's features. "Thank you, Mr. Holmes. I have taken lodgings nearby and can be ready whenever you require." Excellent. Now, is there anything else about your brother's disappearance or his research that might prove relevant? Even details that seem insignificant to you might be illuminating. Lady Eleanor hesitated. Just one thing, perhaps. The night before he disappeared, Frederick sent me a telegram. It was unusually cryptic, not at all his normal style. She reached into her reticule, withdrew a folded paper, which she handed to Holmes. I wasn't sure what to make of it. Holmes unfolded the telegram and read aloud. Lunar cycle completes tomorrow. Symbols indicate gateway opens. If theory is correct, historic discovery awaits. If wrong, legends of curse may hold truth. Either way, wish me fortune at midnight. He looked up. Most suggestive. The local constable dismissed it as academic excitement, Lady Eleanor said. But Frederick was never one for dramatic pronouncements. He was methodical, cautious. It was so unlike him to speak of curses and gateways. Holmes carefully refolded the telegram and returned it. Indeed, combined with the journal entries, it suggests your brother believed he had discovered something of extraordinary significance, something that compelled him to venture to the tomb at midnight, despite apparent awareness of potential danger. The clock on the mantelpiece ticked softly, marking the passage of time in the quiet room. Watson found himself studying Lady Eleanor's face in the firelight. The composed exterior barely containing her fear, the slight tremor in her hands betraying exhaustion and worry. "You should rest now, Lady Eleanor," Holmes said gently. "Tomorrow will bring fresh perspectives and the beginning of our investigation. Leave your brother's journal with me tonight. There may be details within it that warrant closer examination before we depart." She nodded and rose to her feet, visibly reluctant to part with the journal, but recognizing the wisdom in Holmes's request. "Of course. I'm staying at the Northumberland Hotel, just around the corner." "We shall call for you at 8 tomorrow morning," Holmes assured her, rising to escort her to the door. "Try to rest, if you can. Worry serves no constructive purpose." After Lady Eleanor had departed and her footsteps had faded down the stairs, Holmes returned to his chair, the journal open once more on his lap. The rain had stopped entirely now, leaving only the occasional drip from eaves and the distant rattle of a late-night hansom cab on the cobblestones below. "Well, Watson," Holmes said, his voice low and contemplative, "what do you make of our nocturnal visitor and her missing brother?" Watson settled back into his chair, considering. A scholarly gentleman disappears while investigating ancient symbols on a supposedly cursed tomb. Local authorities find nothing conclusive. His sister, detecting their lack of serious interest, seeks your help. He paused.